Okay, so I need to tell you what happened on the best worst day of my life. And I say best worst because by the time this day was over, I had lost something. I thought I wanted and found something I didn't. No, I already had. But let me start at the beginning, because the beginning is important. It was a Tuesday, my wedding day. I was in the bridal suite at the Harrington Hotel. Floor-length mirror, white dress, my mom fixing my veil, my best friend Renee doing a final check on my bouquet, my cousin Dana already crying because Dana cries at everything and she thought this was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. It was beautiful. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't beautiful, too. 130 people had come from 4 different states. The flowers were perfect. The venue was perfect. 3 years of loving someone and 14 months of planning had produced something that genuinely looked like a dream. My phone buzzed on the vanity. Thought it was the photographer. I picked it up. Maya, I can't do this. I'm sorry. I'm not at the venue. I won't be coming. Please don't try to call me. I need space to figure things out. I'm sorry. I read it once. I read it again. My mom was still fixing my veil. Renee was still checking the bouquet. Dana was still crying, the happy kind of tears. Nobody in that room knew yet. Just me. I was the only one who knew, and I want to tell you what happened inside me in that moment, because it was not what you might expect. It wasn't the hot kind of devastation that makes you drop things and gasp and need people to rush to your side. It was something quieter than that. Something that started very deep and moved upward slowly and settled somewhere behind my eyes as pure, absolute clarity. I put the phone face down on the vanity. I turned to Renee. I said, I need 5 minutes alone. She looked at my face. She has known me since we were 19. She read me in about half a second. She cleared the room, without asking why. The door closed. I sat down. I picked up my phone. I read the text one more time, and then I opened my contacts, and I called my attorney at 11:52 a.m. on my wedding day, in my wedding dress. Okay, so let me back up a little, because you need to understand who Marcus was before you can understand what I did. Marcus Webb, 34 years old, tech startup founder, the kind of man who walks into rooms and immediately becomes the most interesting person in them. Not because he is performing it, but because he genuinely has something, a quality, a brightness, the ability to make you feel like the most important person in his world when his attention is on you. I was dazzled. For 3 full years, I was completely dazzled. And here's the thing about being dazzled. It is not stupidity. Dazzled is what happens when someone is genuinely good at something, and that something is being magnetic and present, and exactly what you need them to be in the moments that count. Dazzled is a reasonable response to a certain kind of person. The problem is what you stop seeing while you are busy being dazzled. I stopped seeing some things, but not everything. And the things I did see, I had been quietly, carefully, almost unconsciously keeping track of. I am a financial strategist. I look at numbers for a living. I find patterns. I notice discrepancies. I document things not because I am suspicious, by nature, but because documentation is as natural, to me as breathing. And I have done it my whole professional life. And I did not stop doing it just because I was in love. 3 weeks before the wedding, I was going through joint financial documents for the pre-marriage asset. Consolidation our advisor had recommended. Routine. Found a transfer, significant amount, from a joint investment account we had opened together to an account I did not recognize. I flagged it quietly to my financial advisor. She did some checking. The account was personal. Marcus's name only. Opened 7 months earlier. 7 months earlier. Was 5 months into our engagement. I sat with that for 3 weeks. I made copies of everything. I mentioned it casually to my attorney during a prenuptial review meeting, framing it as something to be aware of, something to look at after the wedding. My attorney noted it. And that note, that quiet casual mention in a meeting 2 weeks before my wedding, was about to become the most important thing I had ever said in a lawyer's office. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the prenup. Marcus had brought it up 4 months before the wedding. He framed it the way he framed everything, practically, maturely, as protection for both of us. His investors encouraged it, standard for someone in his position. I agreed easily, because I had my own assets and my own career, and I was never going to be financially entangled with anyone in a way that I didn't fully understand. I had one condition: full financial disclosure from both parties, and a specific provision about what happened to jointly held assets if the marriage did not take place. His attorney pushed back on that last part. Marcus told me it was standard pushback. Don't worry about it. I kept the provision. Attorney kept the provision. Marcus signed the document with the provision in it because the wedding was 3 months away and he wanted it done, and he looked at that clause the way people look at the fine print in an insurance policy. Something you sign hoping you will never need it. He needed it. He just didn't know yet that I was already on the phone at 11:52 a.m. discussing exactly what it said. So there I am. Bridal suite. Wedding dress. Attorney on the phone. She pulls up the prenuptial agreement. She pulls up her notes from our meeting 2 weeks prior. She looks at the disclosure clause. She looks at the transfer I had flagged. She calls me back at 12:08. She tells me what I needed to know. The transfer from our joint account had happened during the prenuptial disclosure window. It had not been disclosed. The provision I had insisted on was triggered. The jointly held assets were subject to immediate dissolution and equal distribution in the event the marriage did not occur. I said thank you. Hung up. I sat there for a moment. And then I opened my laptop. Yes, I brought my laptop to my wedding venue. Marcus always found this slightly annoying. In retrospect, that was information. I had 30 minutes before Renee was going to come back through that door. I used all 30 of them. When Renee came back, she looked at my face and she said very quietly, "How bad?" I said, "He's not coming." She closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. Then she opened them and she was completely present and completely focused. And that is why she is my best friend, and has been my best friend since we were 19 years old. "What do you need?" she said. "I need you to tell my parents before someone else does. Tell the coordinator, and give me 30 more minutes." "What are you going to do with 30 more minutes?" "Work," I said. She nodded. No further questions. She went to find my parents. I went back to my laptop. The investor relations piece took the most time. During the financial consolidation review 3 weeks earlier, I had found irregularities in the funding round documentation. Not definitive, not something I could have walked into a room and made a case about confidently, but the kind of thing that investor relations departments take seriously when raised by someone with standing in documentation. I had standing. I had documentation. I had copies of everything because I always have copies of everything. I made the call at 12:34 p.m. Then I changed out of the dress. Just kidding. I didn't change. At a certain point, the dress became a kind of armor, and I was not ready to take it off. I walked out of that bridal suite at 12:45 p.m. And I want to be clear about how I walked out. Not the way you imagine a jilted bride walks out of a bridal suite. Not with that fragile, careful quality of someone holding themselves together with both hands. I walked out the way I walk into a difficult client meeting. Prepared Renee. Had handled the immediate situation. My parents had been told. The coordinator had been told. My father was in the main hall telling 230 guests with the quiet dignity that has always been his particular gift. I found the wedding coordinator in the hallway. "The reception venue," I said. "The deposit. Is any of it refundable?" She checked her tablet. 60% with 48 hours notice. Start the process. Catering, florist, photographer, everything with a cancellation clause today. She stared at me. "Today," I said. "Well, I'm here to authorize it." She started making calls. I found Marcus's best man, Jason, standing in the corridor looking like a man who wanted to be literally anywhere else on the planet. "Where is he?" I said. "Maya, I swear I didn't know he was going to." "I believe you," I said. "That's not why I'm asking." Jason looked at me for a moment. "His apartment," he said quietly. "He went there this morning. His apartment. Not our apartment. His apartment. The one he had kept after we moved in together. Because he said he needed a separate workspace, and I had accepted that. Because I had been finding explanations for things. I thanked Jason, called my attorney. She filed the paperwork on the joint account at 2:30 p.m. while 230 guests were eating cocktail hour food that had already been prepared and my mother had decided should be served because people had come from 4 states, and they needed to eat, while Marcus was at his apartment while I was still in the dress. He called it. 3:15, I answered. Maya, I owe you an explanation. You owe me several things, I said. My attorney is filing on the joint account right now. You'll hear from her before end of business. Silence. The joint account. The one with the undisclosed transfer, I said. The one that should have appeared in the prenuptial disclosure. That one. How did you... I'm a financial strategist, Marcus, I said. I look at numbers for a living. Did you really think I wasn't going to look at ours? Nothing. I also spoke with investor relations this afternoon, I said. There are some questions about the funding round documentation. They're looking into it. His voice changed completely. The composure. Gone. Maya, what are you doing? Protecting my interests, I said. Which is what you should have thought about before you sent a text message 43 minutes before our wedding. We can talk about this. We can figure this out. You sent a text, I said. To end 3 years. A text message, Marcus. Silence. So no, I said. We are not going to talk about it. You will hear from my attorney. The investor relations process will go where it goes. And whatever you need to figure out about yourself, I genuinely hope you figure it out somewhere that is not my life. I hung up. Renee was in the doorway. 2 glasses of champagne. She held one out. Done, she said. Done, I said. We drank it. It was really good champagne. We had paid for it, and it deserved to be drunk by people who showed up. The investor relations inquiry took 6 weeks. The findings were significant. Enough that the board requested Marcus's resignation. As CEO, pending a full review, he was not arrested. That is not usually how these things end. But he was removed from the company he had built his entire identity around. The platform. The profile. The person journalists wanted to quote. Gone. The joint account. Dissolved per the prenuptial terms. The undisclosed transfer was handled in a separate process. I got 60% of my deposits back from the venue and catering and florist. Not everything. Enough. I gave the flowers to the hospital 2 blocks. From the Harrington, all of them. Every arrangement, because they were beautiful and they had been paid for, and beauty should not go to waste because a man sent a text message. 6 months later, Renee and I had dinner at the restaurant, where Marcus and I had our first date. Not to be dramatic, because it is genuinely an excellent restaurant, and I was not going to let him take a good restaurant from me on top of everything else. Renee raised her glass. To the dress, she said. I laughed. I had kept the dress. Not for sentiment, because it is a beautiful dress that I paid for and it fits me perfectly, and I am going to wear it again, someday, to something that deserves it. To the dress, I said. Okay, so here's the thing I want you to take from all of this. I had 43 minutes between that text message and the moment I was supposed to walk down that aisle, and I want to be honest with you about what those 43 minutes actually looked like, because it was not all strategy and phone calls and perfectly composed decision making. There were about 4 minutes in there where I sat on that settee in my wedding dress, and I pressed my hands flat on my knees, and I breathed very carefully, because if I breathed any other way, I was going to fall apart completely, and I could not fall apart completely yet. 4 minutes of that, then 30 minutes of working, and then later that night, alone in my car in a parking garage at 11 p.m., I fell apart completely and privately and for a long time, and that part was real and necessary, and I do not pretend otherwise. Both things happened, the holding together and the falling apart. Both of them are true, but here is what I know, the 30 minutes of working first. That is what made the difference, because the window for action is only open for so long, and if you have been paying attention, which I had been, and if you have been making copies, which I had been, and if you kept that provision in the prenuptial even when his attorney pushed back, which I had, then 43 minutes is enough. 43 minutes is more than enough. He sent a text message, made it a very expensive text message, and then I gave the flowers to the hospital. Because beauty should not go to waste. Drop it in the comments right now. Have you ever had to hold yourself completely together in public? while everything inside you was somewhere else entirely. What did you do with the time you had? Smash that like button. Subscribe for more stories where the woman who got left standing had already done the work. I read every single comment. Everyone, see you in the next one.